Before we get started, hit the comments and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is over there. Whether you're catching sunrise in Nairobi, burning midnight in New York, afternoon in Canada, or evening in France, I want to hear from you. Don't just watch silently, let me know where in the world you are. Now let's dive into the story. The hangar of Fort Helix fell silent the moment Admiral Rowan Hale entered. His boots struck the concrete with the slow, commanding rhythm of someone used to owning every room he walked into. Officers snapped to attention, every officer except the new arrival standing near the open bay doors. Lyra Voss didn't look up. She simply inspected the rifle case in her hands as if the Admiral wasn't standing 10 feet away. Hale stopped in front of her, arms behind his back, a smirk pulling at the corner of his mouth. "You," he said loud enough to echo. "What's your rank, soldier?" Everyone knew the question was meant to humiliate. He asked it the way a wolf plays with prey. A few junior officers chuckled. Lyra stayed perfectly still. Then she lifted her chin, and the Admiral saw the ink on her wrist. A sniper's tattoo. Not a common one. The one. His smirk vanished. The laughter behind him died instantly. The air changed, thickened, as if the entire hangar suddenly understood something it shouldn't. That tattoo marked one of only 12 operatives in the Navy's most secretive sniper program. 12 ghosts who rarely appeared in daylight. And one of them had disappeared 3 years ago under a storm of explosions and silence in a desert no one returned from. Lyra Voss. A soldier memorialized as dead. Yet here she stood, staring back at the Admiral like she'd never been gone. Hale's voice cracked before he could hide it. "Where did you earn that mark?" he asked, but the question sounded more like disbelief than authority. Lyra locked her rifle case with a calm click. "Classified," she said. "Sir." The officers who had laughed were pale now. The Admiral stepped closer, eyes searching her face as though trying to confirm she was human and not a ghost wearing skin. "You were reported Kia," he whispered. Lyra didn't respond. She didn't need to. Something in the brown speckled desert dust drifting through the hangar doors seemed to answer for her. Hale reached toward her sleeve, hesitated, then stopped, afraid to touch the past made flesh. "Why are you here?" he asked quietly. He wasn't the Admiral in that moment. He was a man grasping for logic. Lyra met his eyes without blinking. "Because someone sent for me," she said. "Someone who outranks you." A wave of confusion spread through the officers like electricity through wet wires. Nobody outranked a SEAL Admiral except 2 people, and neither appeared in public. Hale's jaw tightened. His pride warred with something far more dangerous, fear. "Who?" he demanded. Lyra lifted the rifle case onto her shoulder, the movement smooth, effortless, controlled. "You'll find out soon," she replied. "But before that, tell your men to stop laughing at soldiers they know nothing about." The hangar froze. The air felt ready to shatter. Hale stepped back 1 inch, just one, but it was enough for every watching officer to feel the power shift. More dramatic than a shout, more terrifying than a threat. For the first time in years, the Admiral wasn't the most dangerous person in the room. Lyra Voss was. And from the way she looked at him, calm, steady, unbroken, he realized something else. Whatever had brought her back wasn't good news for him. The desert heat shimmered like a living creature, rising in waves over the cracked earth of Marrakesh. 3 years before she walked into Fort Helix, Lyra Voss lay belly down on a sandstone ridge, eye pressed to her scope, heartbeat slow enough to count the seconds between each thump. Wind, 8 knots east. Distance, 1,420 meters. Target, a warlord responsible for 32 dead civilians. Her finger rested lightly on the trigger, steady as a mountain. She breathed once, deeply. Then everything went wrong at the same time. A distant explosion boomed through the valley. Her comms crackled with a scream, "Lyra, fall back. They've found you." And a plume of smoke erupted behind her. Her team had been ambushed. Not just ambushed, obliterated. And she knew instantly that this wasn't just bad luck. Someone had given away their position. Someone high-ranking. She slid down the ridge, sand burning her palms, while gunfire erupted from every direction. She sprinted toward the extraction point, boots hammering the ground as helicopters roared overhead. But instead of friendly rotors, she heard the cold mechanical pulse of enemy craft. Then came the call she'd never forget. "Viper unit is gone." All of them. Viper unit, her brothers, her closest allies, the only people who ever understood the silence she carried. Lyra stumbled, breath ripped from her lungs. A shockwave blasted her sideways as one of the helicopters fired a missile into the ridge she'd just abandoned. Dust swallowed the sky. Pain seared through her shoulder as shrapnel tore into her skin. She crawled behind a broken slab of sandstone, clutching her rifle as if it were the last piece of her identity still intact. The world narrowed into ringing ears, choking dust, and grief so sudden it felt like her chest was splitting open. When she finally reached the extraction site, hoping for rescue, she found only ash. The safe house burned in a twisted metal heap, flames licking the sky with hungry orange tongues. 3 bodies lay in the sand, 2 friendly scouts and a pilot who never even made it to his seat. Lyra stood frozen, sweat soaking her spine. This wasn't an enemy attack. This was too efficient, too synchronized. Someone had orchestrated it with precision. Someone who had access to mission details that only her unit and command personnel held. Her sniper instinct screamed the truth she didn't want to believe. This was a betrayal. A clean one. And they were going to make sure she didn't survive to talk about it. She dragged the bodies into the shade, closed their eyes with trembling fingers, and whispered their names into the wind, promising them justice. Then she vanished into the desert, carrying only her rifle, a bleeding shoulder, and a rage she couldn't put into words. For 3 days she traveled alone, hunted like an animal. Enemy vehicles combed the wasteland. Drones hummed overhead. Every step hurt, every inhaled breath tasted like metal. But she didn't die. She refused to. On the 4th night, she reached an abandoned communications bunker half buried in sand. Inside, she found a single working transmitter, battered but functional. With shaking hands, she tried contacting command. Static. She tried emergency frequencies. Nothing. Her unit had been wiped, the mission erased, her existence cut from the records. That was when the final message came through, faint, broken but unmistakably real. Lyra, don't come back. They framed you. Stay dead. A voice she trusted more than her own instincts. And then silence. In that bunker, staring at the cracked screen, she made a decision that if they wanted her dead, she would become a ghost. If they wanted silence, she would collect truth. And if someone in command betrayed Viper unit, she would return one day quiet, patient, and armed with the kind of vengeance only a sniper understands. The world outside the bunker was merciless, but inside, Lyra Voss rebuilt herself piece by piece. She fashioned a routine from scarcity, sandbag drills at dawn, precision shooting at dusk, and mental exercises that honed patience to a razor's edge. Every day she pressed against her limits, testing the boundaries of endurance. Her shoulder, scarred and stiff, became a reminder that pain was temporary, discipline eternal. She scavenged old caches of weapons, taught herself mechanical repairs, and fashioned traps in the dunes to keep herself alert. At night, she stared at the stars and memorized the constellations, training her eyes to track movement across vast distances, simulating the sniper's patience she would need to reclaim the world she'd lost. Each bullet she loaded, each shot fired into the sand, carried names she refused to forget. Her fallen brothers, betrayed by someone who called themselves an ally. Every calculation was precise, every heartbeat measured. The desert had become her classroom, her confessional, and her battlefield all at once. Months passed and she began to reappear in the intelligence networks only as a whisper. Ghost sniper spotted near Anarkesh, they said, unaware of who she truly was. She moved like wind, invisible, always calculating angles of approach, egress, and observation. Each encounter was a lesson in patience, timing, and survival. She had no name on record, no ID, no rank. To the world she was dead. To her enemies she became a shadow that unsettled even seasoned operatives. Yet Lyra knew that power alone wouldn't bring justice. She needed evidence, allies she could trust, and the moment to strike when betrayal was most vulnerable. The desert honed her body, but it also sharpened her mind. Every patrol she observed, every communication intercepted, was a puzzle piece, and she assembled them meticulously, never revealing her hand too early. At night, she trained her senses beyond the physical. Listening became more than a skill, it was survival. The faint hum of engines over sand dunes, the subtle pattern of footsteps in cracked earth, the whisper of a man adjusting his rifle strap in the distance, all registered in her mind like coordinates on a map. Sleep was scheduled in 20-minute intervals. Exhaustion was a tool. Hunger and thirst were companions she used to sharpen her resolve rather than break it. Lyra learned to anticipate movements before they happened, predicting patterns of enemies and allies alike. Her body moved with the fluidity of a predator, but her mind remained several steps ahead, calculating consequences, probabilities, and opportunities for justice. By the time she left Anarkesh, she was no longer the soldier who had been betrayed. She was a weapon forged from absence, patience, and rage. The final days of her self-imposed exile were the hardest. She returned to the bunker one last time, burned every piece of evidence tying her location to herself, and left a single mark on her arm, a tattoo of a sniper's scope overlaying a desert horizon. It was a declaration, not a vanity, a symbol that she had survived, had mastered, and would return when the time was right. Lyra Voss vanished from sight, moving west toward extraction points she had mapped years before. Somewhere in the folds of the world, she would return to Fort Helix, not as a ghost of the past but as the reckoning the Navy had underestimated. She carried nothing but her rifle, the desert in her eyes, and a patience that had been honed to lethal perfection. And in her mind, she rehearsed the day she would walk into the hangar, unannounced, unbreakable, and undeniable. The first time Lyra set foot back on American soil, she didn't breathe. Everything smelled sharper: oil, salt, gunmetal, the faint tang of coffee from a distant mess hall. She walked with her head low, rifle case slung across her back, blending in with uniformed personnel bustling through the port. Nobody noticed her. Nobody remembered her. And that was perfect. She'd trained for years to re-enter the world unnoticed, to study it before acting. Her goal wasn't confrontation, yet. It was to observe, to map the shadows in the command she once served, and to identify the enemy who had destroyed Viper Unit. Even a ghost could gather intelligence if it moved quietly enough. Lyra's eyes scanned every officer she passed, memorizing insignias, habitual gestures, patterns of authority, alliances, and hidden rivalries. Each detail was a thread she could pull later to unravel the betrayal that had cost her everything. She arrived at Fort Helix under cover of a routine inspection schedule she had intercepted months earlier. The hangar smelled of concrete, grease, and the faint copper scent of gunfire, all familiar yet alien after 3 years in the desert. Lyra observed quietly, noting officers' behavior, the chain of command, and the habitual smugness of certain sergeants. Hale's name surfaced in her mental map almost immediately. The Admiral's reputation was larger than life, commanding, intimidating, unyielding, but she remembered him differently, a man human enough to make mistakes. She needed confirmation of who he truly was now, whether he had changed or remained the same. With careful patience, she positioned herself near routine supply runs, observing him from a distance. Hale moved with the authority of a king in a room full of soldiers, but Lyra detected cracks. A hesitation here, a slight overcompensation there. By the second day she had catalogued everything. His schedule, his demeanor, the security lapses that could be exploited. She practiced her patience as rigorously as her aim, walking the corridors without drawing attention, blending into the background of clanking boots and chatter. She made mental notes of who might aid her mission and who would report her instantly. Every officer, every soldier, every civilian was a variable she calculated before acting. Her sniper's instincts had not dulled, they had sharpened. She envisioned the hangar in layers: floor plans, sight lines, probable escape routes, the angle of the morning sun through windows. Lyra Voss was here to reclaim her past without triggering a war. But she also knew timing was everything. Acting too early would expose her, acting too late would allow the traitor to slip away. The moment of recognition came sooner than she expected. Hale entered the hangar with his usual air of authority, a smirk already forming as he noticed a newcomer among the ranks. Officers stiffened and Lyra felt her pulse accelerate, not from fear but anticipation. She stepped forward, rifle case in hand, posture flawless, movements precise. The moment she approached, Hale's eyes landed on her. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then he noticed the edge of her tattoo, barely visible beneath her sleeve. And everything changed. The smirk vanished. Laughter froze mid-air. His body tensed like a predator caught off guard. Lyra didn't speak immediately, she simply let him process what he was seeing. A soldier presumed dead, standing in front of him, alive, composed, unyielding, carrying the weight of vengeance and truth in her gaze. In that instant the room shifted. The hunter and the hunted were no longer clear. Lyra Voss had returned. The hangar was still thick with tension as Hale blinked at her tattoo, the ghost of recognition crossing his face before he masked it with authority. Officers whispered behind him, shuffling uneasily, sensing something monumental was unfolding. Lyra Voss didn't flinch. She adjusted the strap of her rifle case, the movement deliberate, calm, almost ceremonial. Every officer's eyes were drawn to her, but she only saw him. Hale's mind raced, scanning his memory for explanations, denials, anything to reconcile the impossible truth standing before him. He opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. Lyra Voss? The syllables trembled in his voice, betraying disbelief and a flicker of guilt that hadn't aged well. Lyra's lips curved in a subtle, controlled smirk, the kind that comes from someone who knows the upper hand has shifted. She didn't answer immediately. She let the silence press against him, her presence like gravity, until he could no longer avoid the truth. She had survived the desert ambush. Hale's internal defenses collapsed further when he noticed the small details. Her posture, the precision of her movements, the calm fire in her eyes. This was not a soldier returning to the fold. This was a weapon reborn, forged from betrayal and absence. He realized how easily he had underestimated her, the arrogance of assuming she was gone. The room felt smaller, the hum of fluorescent lights louder, as if the hangar itself was leaning in to watch this confrontation. Officers dared not breathe. Hale's hands twitched at his sides, recalling old commands, old trust, and old mistakes. Lyra stepped closer, not a threat, but a presence that demanded acknowledgement. "You've been avoiding questions, sir," she said softly, voice steady, like a sniper delivering precision even with words. "I came back because someone wanted answers. Someone in your chain." The implications hit Hale like a cold wave. Who had orchestrated Viper Unit's destruction? Who had tried to erase her existence? Every past decision, every promotion, every confidential message she had been excluded from, he traced it all in seconds. Panic flitted across his composed facade, replaced quickly by a rigid, measured fear. Lyra was not just a witness. She was judgment incarnate, and she had the patience of a desert storm. He realized she had spent years preparing for this very moment, collecting intelligence, building the map of betrayal that would leave nothing hidden. Officers glanced nervously at him, reading the shift in his demeanor that even years of leadership couldn't conceal. Lyra's eyes never left him, yet they seemed to penetrate deeper than any ocular device could, seeing guilt, hesitation, and fear he thought buried under decades of rank. The tension cracked when Lyra finally moved to set her rifle case on the hangar floor. Hale's hand twitched as if to intervene, but he understood the futility immediately. The rifle was a symbol, a declaration. She was capable of action, silent but devastating, and she was no longer the lost soldier he had mourned. She lifted her gaze, steady, direct, unflinching, and spoke. "You need to tell me who ordered the hit on Viper Unit," she said. The room seemed to hold its breath. Hale opened his mouth, closed it, then finally exhaled slowly. Every officer present felt the tension crackle like a live wire. The admiral who had commanded respect and fear for decades now stood paralyzed, caught between the consequences of truth and the need to protect his career. For the first time, he understood that Lyra Voss had returned not to ask for permission. She had returned to unravel everything, and nothing would ever be the same. Lyra didn't wait for an answer. She had returned not to negotiate but to hunt. Her mind ran through the chain of command like a predator mapping escape routes and vulnerabilities. Every officer she had observed over the last days had been catalogued, every routine memorized, every slip noted. Now, standing in the hangar with Hale frozen before her, she began to trace the shadows of the betrayal that had cost her team their lives. Her fingers brushed the rifle case strap, a small, almost imperceptible gesture, signaling that she was ready. Hale's silence was the only acknowledgement she needed. He had recognized the stakes. She would not falter. She would not plead. She would extract the truth, with or without his cooperation. The first step was control. She needed access, insight, and confirmation. Lyra moved with deliberate calm toward the communications console, scanning logs, message trails, and security footage. Each file, each timestamp, each officer's movement became a breadcrumb in the trail leading to the traitor. Hale tried to follow, but even he felt unprepared for the speed and precision of her mind. She could anticipate errors, detect lies, and predict hesitation with terrifying accuracy. Every whisper in the hangar, every footstep on the concrete, every shift of attention was catalogued in her memory. The atmosphere was tense. Officers who had once smirked at her presence now avoided eye contact, sensing the silent storm in the woman they presumed dead. As Lyra traced the threads, fragments of the desert assault came back in vivid flashes. Viper Unit's final moments, the betrayal, the bodies burned and scattered across sand and metal. Each memory added fuel, sharpening the edge of her resolve. She paused only once, taking a deep breath and closing her eyes, letting the cold desert wind of memory remind her of what she had endured. Then, methodically, she returned to the present. Every officer, every detail, every shadow was now part of a living map. The traitor was in the building. The betrayal was closer than anyone dared imagine. And Lyra Voss was already several steps ahead, unseen but unstoppable, ready to confront the lie and extract justice in a way that would leave no room for error. Hale finally found his voice, breaking the silence. "You don't understand what you're doing," he said, but the words were weak. Lyra turned, calm, precise, her gaze steady and unflinching. "I understand more than you know," she replied. "I understand what you didn't protect. I understand who betrayed Viper Unit. I understand the cost of your hesitation. And now, I understand exactly who I need to confront first." Her words sliced through the tension in the hangar, leaving a quiet hum of fear and respect in their wake. Hale swallowed, realizing that the woman standing before him was not just a soldier, she was judgment embodied. And the hunt had begun. There would be no mercy. There would be no shortcuts. Only the truth, delivered with the precision of a sniper's patience and a vengeance years in the making. The shadows of betrayal were about to be exposed, and Lyra Voss was the storm that would illuminate every dark corner. Lyra's investigation had narrowed to a single officer, Commander Elias Karan, a man whose calm demeanor hid a cunning streak sharp enough to sever careers and lives without leaving fingerprints. He had been in charge of operational logistics when Viper Unit was ambushed, and subtle traces in communications logs, financial transfers, and security breaches all pointed toward him. Lyra didn't confront him in the open, she observed first, letting him believe the world was still his to manipulate. From a shadowed corner of the command wing, she watched him move through the hallways, his every gesture confident, arrogant, unaware of the storm about to descend. Each step he took was catalogued, recorded in memory as if etching the blueprint of his undoing. Lyra's patience had been trained by deserts, ambushes, and years of absence. Now it would serve its ultimate purpose, justice. The opportunity presented itself during a night drill in the hangar, the lights dimmed and only emergency strips illuminating the space. Karan moved among officers, barking orders, projecting authority. Lyra approached from the shadows, every movement silent, deliberate, every footfall calculated to avoid detection. Hale's eyes widened as he realized her intent. She didn't need to speak, her presence alone communicated the reckoning she carried. Karan's first hint that something was wrong came as a whisper of movement behind him, subtle but distinct. He turned, saw nothing, then froze as Lyra emerged fully from the darkness, rifle case in hand. Her tattoo, partially visible beneath her sleeve, glinted faintly in the emergency lights. The room, normally filled with noise and clanging boots, fell into a heavy silence, thick with anticipation. Karan's confident smile faltered. "You've been looking for me," Karan said, voice trying to mask alarm with bravado. Lyra's lips barely twitched. "I've been looking for answers," she said. "Not excuses." She stepped closer, moving with the quiet authority of a predator. Every officer present instinctively stepped back, leaving a clear path between her and the traitor. Lyra's eyes didn't waver. Every detail of Karan's movements, every micro-expression, every hesitation was noted, stored, and analyzed. She could predict his next words before he spoke them, could sense his fear even as he tried to disguise it. Karan swallowed hard, realizing too late that the soldier he had assumed dead was now the executioner of truth. Lyra's rifle case was not a threat, but a statement. She had endured the impossible, and now he would answer for every life he had sacrificed. The confrontation escalated quickly but silently. Lyra didn't raise her weapon, she didn't need to. Her presence, the history between them, and the weight of years of preparation carried authority more lethal than any gunfire. "Why?" she asked quietly, voice steady, precise, yet sharp enough to cut through the tension. Karan stammered, scrambling for lies, excuses, self-preservation. His confidence crumbled as she recounted, methodically, each breach, each betrayal, each deliberate misstep that had destroyed Viper Unit. Officers in the hangar realized for the first time the depth of his deceit. Hale watched, immobilized between relief and horror. Lyra's gaze never left Karan's. She had returned not for revenge alone, but to expose the corruption hidden behind ranks and medals. In that moment, Karan understood something irrevocable. Lyra Voss was alive, precise, unyielding, and nothing would save him from the consequences he had orchestrated. The hangar felt suffocating as Lyra circled Karan, her movements slow, deliberate, every step measured to intimidate without violence. Officers lined the perimeter, too stunned to intervene, their loyalty fractured by the revelation of betrayal. Hale's face was pale, a mixture of awe and dread. Karan's confidence had evaporated. He realized that every lie, every manipulation, every order he had twisted to destroy Viper Unit had brought him to this single point of reckoning. Lyra's voice was calm but carried the weight of years of preparation. "You orchestrated it," she said simply. "You killed my team. You tried to erase me. And now it ends." Her eyes never left his, piercing through the bravado, through the excuses, into the raw truth. Karan stammered, trying to justify himself, but she anticipated every word, every hesitation, every strategy he might attempt. She placed the rifle case on the floor and opened it with a single motion, revealing the tools of her trade, each weapon polished, each sight calibrated to perfection. It was both a warning and a promise. She had the skill, the precision, and the patience to execute if necessary. Officers who had once sneered at the new recruit now realized the enormity of the force standing before them. Hale stepped slightly forward, but Lyra raised a hand, signaling him to stay. This was her confrontation, her reckoning. "You underestimated me," she said, tone low, controlled. "You thought I was dead. You thought no one would hold you accountable. But I survived. I trained. I waited. And now you face the consequences." Karan's breathing quickened, sweat forming along his temples. The tension stretched taut like a wire ready to snap. Karan lunged for the emergency alarm, a last desperate attempt to summon backup, but Lyra's reflexes were instantaneous. In a single motion, she intercepted his wrist, twisting it behind him and forcing him to the ground. The rifle case clattered, guns inside glinting under the harsh lights, but she never reached for them. She didn't need to. Her skill, patience, and reputation were enough. Karan struggled, but her grip was unyielding, trained by years in deserts, bunkers, and ambushes. Every officer froze, witnessing the silent power of a soldier who had been presumed dead, now manifesting as an unstoppable force. "It's over," Lyra said, each syllable measured, precise. Karan's eyes widened in terror, his facade completely shattered. Hale finally found his voice, authoritative but tinged with a fear he hadn't felt in decades. "Secure him," he ordered, his tone leaving no room for argument. Officers moved quickly to restrain Karan, whose arrogance had evaporated completely under Lyra's gaze. She released him slowly, watching him struggle, ensuring the humiliation mirrored the betrayal he had committed. Every detail had been catalogued, every step of his downfall deliberate. Lyra stood over him, silent and unyielding, a monument to endurance, vengeance, and precision. The hangar exhaled collectively, the tension dissolving but leaving a permanent mark on everyone present. She had returned not merely to confront, but to reclaim her past, and in doing so she had rewritten the rules of fear, respect, and authority in Fort Helix. The traitor was revealed. The hunt was complete. Justice had been served. The hangar was quiet now, except for the sound of restrained footsteps and the faint hum of the overhead lights. Karan sat handcuffed, staring at the floor, unable to process how his careful web of lies had unraveled so completely. Lyra Voss stood a few feet away, her posture relaxed but her gaze sharp, every detail of the man who had destroyed her unit etched into memory. Hale watched from the side, his face a mixture of relief and guilt. He had underestimated her once, believed she was gone, and now faced the consequences of that error. The officers who had witnessed the confrontation were silent, understanding that a soldier once thought dead had returned with unmatched precision and unshakable resolve. Lyra finally spoke, her voice carrying the weight of years of planning and silent rage. "You wanted to erase us. You wanted no trace, no witnesses. You failed. And now the truth is here." Karan lifted his head, the first flicker of desperation and fear crossing his features. "You don't understand, you don't know," he began, but Lyra interrupted, her tone calm, unyielding. "I know enough," she said. "I know who betrayed my team. I know every lie you told. I know every movement you made to cover your tracks. I survived when everyone else died. That gives me everything I need." Officers leaned in subtly, listening, watching, understanding that this was more than just justice. It was a lesson in accountability, one that the Navy would remember for years. Hale exhaled slowly, realizing that he had a role to play in ensuring the proper channels carried out the consequences. Lyra wasn't just seeking revenge, she was demanding a reckoning that would expose corruption and prevent future betrayals. The silence stretched as Karan's breathing grew erratic. Lyra stepped closer, eyes locking on his, unflinching. "You can try to lie again, but the evidence is here. Witnesses, logs, and the lives you tried to erase will speak louder than any defense you can muster." Karan's arrogance had evaporated completely, replaced by fear and realization. He had underestimated the consequences of underestimating her. Hale nodded to nearby officers to ensure no retaliation or rash action occurred, understanding that the real victory was the exposure of truth. The hangar had become a theater of justice, and Lyra was both judge and executor in the silent courtroom that had formed around her. Every officer present felt the gravity of what had just transpired, the Navy's deadliest, most disciplined operative had returned, and nothing would ever be the same. Finally, Lyra stepped back, releasing the space around Karan but keeping him firmly within her gaze. "The rest will follow," she said quietly. "Every trace, every detail, every accomplice will be accounted for. Viper Unit didn't die in vain. And anyone who believes they can manipulate the system again will meet the same consequences." Hale approached cautiously, his respect for her evident, tinged with awe. "You did what I couldn't," he admitted. Lyra's eyes softened slightly, not in forgiveness but in recognition of truth and authority. "I did what was necessary," she replied. "Now it's your turn to ensure it never happens again." As officers began processing Karan, securing him and preparing the formal investigation, the hangar felt different, charged, alive and profoundly altered. Lyra Voss had returned and justice had finally caught up. The morning light spilled across Fort Helix, painting the hangar in shades of gold and steel. Lyra Voss stood alone for a moment, the rifle case slung across her shoulder, watching as officers moved with a new kind of respect, their whispers tinged with awe. The chaos of the previous night had left its mark. Commander Karan was in confinement, evidence of his betrayal fully documented, and the chain of command realigned to prevent such corruption from taking root again. Hale approached, his expression somber but steady, the weight of years of leadership visible in the set of his shoulders. "You've done more than survive," he said quietly. "You've reminded us all what it means to serve, what it means to protect, and what it means to endure." Lyra's eyes met his, cool and measured, reflecting both the desert storms of the past and the clarity of her purpose now fulfilled. She walked through the hangar, observing the subtle shifts in attitude. Officers no longer glanced at her with skepticism or amusement. They recognized the authority she carried, earned not by rank alone but by experience, by survival, and by truth. Hale followed her quietly, leaving space but offering the silent acknowledgement of respect. Lyra paused at the edge of the bay doors, looking out at the fleet beyond, the waves of the ocean echoing the rhythm of her heartbeat. For years she had been ghost, shadow, and weapon. Now she was something more, a living testament to resilience, precision, and unwavering purpose. Her sniper tattoo, half visible beneath her sleeve, caught the sunlight, a mark of survival, of endurance, of justice reclaimed. The investigation into Viper Unit's destruction continued, but the momentum had shifted. Lyra provided every detail she had collected, every observation, every calculated piece of evidence. Hale ensured that Karan faced the full consequences of his actions, and the Navy initiated systemic reforms to prevent any similar betrayal. Yet, the personal victory was Lyra's alone. The ghosts of her fallen team had been honored, and the betrayal that haunted her years in the desert was now exposed. Officers who had doubted her presence now followed her lead in operational planning, inspired by the sheer force of her intellect, patience, and courage. She no longer moved through shadows, she moved through light, defined by skill, determination, and the lessons of survival etched into every movement. Before she left the hangar, Lyra paused one last time, letting the moment settle. Hale approached and extended a hand, not in command but in solidarity. "You've changed everything," he said softly. "The Navy, the men and women who serve, it will never forget this day." Lyra accepted the gesture, a small nod acknowledging both respect and closure. She turned toward the fleet once more, the wind brushing her hair, carrying with it the scent of salt and metal, the echo of battles fought and survived. The rifle case on her shoulder felt lighter now, not a tool of vengeance but a symbol of triumph. She had returned not just to confront the past but to shape the future. And as she walked away from Fort Helix, each step was a declaration. Lyra Voss was alive, unbroken, and forever etched into the history she had survived to protect. The desert storms of memory, the betrayals, the losses, they were behind her. Ahead was clarity, justice, and rebirth. The Navy had witnessed her reckoning, and the world would remember her name.